right. Welcome to the Points Virtual Town Hall with Fitchburg State University President Richard Lapidus, Provost Alberto Cardella, and Vice President of Student Affairs Laura Bayless. Thank you all for being here today. As the managing editor of the student newspaper, I'd like to start by reiterating the commitment of the Point in making accessible, important information for the student body and providing the student body the opportunity to voice its questions and concerns. This is, of course, a very important time to do so. We have a set of questions today provided by students across campus to ask both of you, or all three of you, I should say. And I'd like to remind our viewers that they can submit questions in real time via the chat feature on the YouTube live stream or by using the hashtag FSU Town Hall on Twitter. I would like to introduce my colleague and staff writer at The Point, Peter Canova, who will be asking questions as well with me today that are from the student body. So let's get into our first question. On Monday, April 26th, the president's office sent out an email notifying the campus that the vaccine will be mandated for members of the campus community. What went into making this decision?
Sure. So we had been thinking about obviously the safety and well-being of our campus community over the last 18 months. And as the vaccine started to ramp up, we felt that it was an opportunity for us to increase the opportunity come the fall to be back to as normal an operation as we possibly could. If there was a common question that has run through student questioning now for the last year, it has been, when are we going to get back to what we had expected university life to look like? And so with that question being pervasive, the presidents of the university system got together and started talking about the vaccine rollout and what we thought the possibilities would be. At the same time, we of course had seen the UMass system come out with a similar announcement. They were a bit ahead of us, and schools around the country starting to have serious conversations about that. So with that, we had agreement that we would, under the caveat that the FDA would formally approve the vaccine from its emergency status to its full-blown status, that we would voice our intention so that both returning students and incoming students and their parents kind of knew what the fall would look like.
So as opposed to right now where the vaccine is just under emergency use authorization, the vaccine mandate will only take effect should the FDA approve it for full use. Am I correct in hearing that?
That is correct.
Okay. There are still, we have heard concerns from students who are expressing their concerns over having to receive the vaccine at the will of the university in order to return to campus next fall. Is there any sort of pushback that students can expect should they choose not to receive the vaccine?
Yeah, so let me flip it around and suggest that there are routes of accommodation for some. There will be the availability of a medical waiver. So if for whatever reason your doctor or healthcare provider suggests that this would be unhealthy for you, of course, there's an accommodation there. There is a religious accommodation as well. So if your faith, whatever that might be, suggests that this would conflict, there would be that option as well. And then there might be other options available, perhaps on an as needed basis to address other things that perhaps fall through the cracks. I don't know if you, Laura or Alberto, have a a slight add-on to that?
Well, I was just going to say, and Dr. Bayless can repeat, this is very similar to what we already have with our existing vaccines, requirements that the universities already have required that have with, that students already abide by and already have the exemption if need be for both medical and religious reasons. So it sort of follows the university's already established practice of requiring vaccinations.
And we are in the process of determining how it is all going to play out across the university system and elsewhere in terms of exemptions and what that looks like and that sort of thing. So stay tuned. As with everything in COVID, it evolves as we're flying the plane.
And so continuing along the thread of looking towards next fall, the past 2 semesters saw students be required to test and wear masks around campus. Is there any sort of idea as to what COVID protocols on campus will look like next fall now that the school is mandating all residents get vaccinated?
Yeah, unfortunately, the answer is an unsatisfying no. So we take our direction from the higher ed COVID plan, which comes out of the governor's office, driven by the CDC and other health authorities, and they have yet to change the plan that we're currently operating under. We anticipate that they will loosen some of that, but there's no guarantee. So, so for example, right now, if you're a face-to-face student on campus, your class has been measured out so that the room capacity equates to a 6-foot distance between every student, because that was the rules. They might turn around, for example, and I have no knowledge of this, but they might turn around and do something similar to K through 12 and say, let's reduce that to 3 foot or 2 foot or whatever the magical number is. So I would anticipate that there will be some modification, but that's unknown. I would also be willing to guess that there would be some face covering requirements still in place for indoor operations. Again, I think we have to be a little bit careful with the vaccine. It certainly provides protections, but it doesn't make any of us bulletproof. And so I think the state probably will go slowly as they repeal some of these things, but it's just too early to tell.
And if I may, we know that we're going to continue testing in the next academic year. We know we have mandatory testing continuing over the summer for folks who are going to be on campus. Whether there will be mandatory testing next year, we don't know. We know there will be surveillance testing, and then as we get guidance from the CDC and the Department of Public Health, we will be able to have a better understanding about what it looks like in terms of mandatory.
And so to build off of, again, perhaps what we could expect in the fall, is there potentially a plan, or has the university at any point considered a plan to vaccinate students through Fitchburg State University, similar to how it offers a site for testing, perhaps a site for vaccinations?
Yes, that is in the works right now. And we have high hopes that we will be able to have vaccination clinics either in the summer or late summer to start processing those that haven't already gotten it.
Great. So if there is, because we don't know, it's so hard to tell at this point, is there a plan for if further outbreaks happen after reopening, is there a plan for what might happen if a bigger outbreak happens?
Sure. So again, I see no reason why the university would forego all of its quarantine and isolation space. We'll have that availability and be able to offer similar services to this year. My hopes, and I will proudly tout one, the good work of our students and the campus community as a whole. If you look on the COVID dashboard and add up a year's worth of performance, I think we're about 0.6, so less than 1%. We had one or two notable outbreaks. We had one, I think, in 2020 that was the result of an outside group that carried it in. And then we had a smaller outbreak in Russell Towers that was immediately isolated as well. I'm hoping that, we would continue on that path. Now we've added another layer with vaccinations. And then we've learned a lot, obviously, over the last 18 months on how to distribute tests, how to do quality contact tracing, and quickly isolate the problem. But we're not going to let our guard down. Next year, I think we can expect that COVID protocols, at least in some form, will be here.
So from an administration standpoint, what has been a takeaway from the pandemic that the university will continue to employ in the future?
There's probably been a lot. I mean, I can let the provost talk about what they've learned about online education, the use of technology, some sort of proactive things there. We've certainly learned about medical protocols and how to better respond to crises. Just as students have experienced a stressful time period, although it's not regularly talked about. We haven't been living the high life here either. We've learned how to quickly react. I think we've learned how to move resources and be more operational and logistically savvy because things are constantly changing. So those are some things that come into my mind. I think, again, I let the provost speak. I think some students have not liked the online world, yet others have thrived on it. So just like everything else, you've got a continuum of polar opposite experiences and everything in between. And so the good things that came out of it, we don't want to give up, but we don't want to be so steadfast that it works against us as well. So perhaps Dr. Cardea, maybe a few thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, I think that you've captured it well, right? I mean, as you said, the perseverance, to use the term of our motto here, of the students have been impressive, as with the faculty and staff who had to deal with these quick changes. But at the same time, there have been both students, faculty, and staff who have not necessarily thrived under the current circumstances. And the question, as you said very well, is how do you then, what is it that we did well and we can continue to do to the benefit of those that may like this type of modality? And what we've done is we've worked with the deans and with the chairs to develop a set of criteria for potential courses and whole programs, but mainly courses that would benefit from maybe greater flexibility in modality. So things like, if we have a course that has multiple sections of many sections, of course, we want to give a few of those percentage to have them be remote or online so that you increase access. There may be courses that are project-based, that all of a sudden a hybrid approach may be a better modality in offering that. And had we not had gone through the pandemic, faculty will not even had the opportunity to experiment with that, right? So there is about 10 different criteria that we're using for when faculty and department chairs and programs identify that, hey, we think that this may be an area where we can benefit and the students can benefit more importantly from the modality change. We will then entertain it. So that's what we're doing. It's being led by, the pedagogy, by the learning outcomes, and by student needs.
And if I might just jump in, that's true on both the way that we're providing service and support to students and for the way we engage students outside the classroom. There are students who, for example, participated in the Falcon Leadership Certification Program that may not have been able to participate before because they were able to participate virtually. And so maybe next year the program will be hybrid rather than fully face-to-face. And another example is in our counseling services area, they've been doing remote telehealth appointments. Now we're going to go back probably to mostly face-to-face counseling appointments. But I also believe that we may still have students have the option of doing telehealth. And it's very interesting that the number of no-shows is way down. And the number of students who, if they do no-show, rescheduling is up. And I think that's because of convenience and access. So I've said many times, I think we're going to be a little nostalgic about this time in some ways, and we've learned some amazing lessons that we need to hold on to and incorporate for the betterment of students.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the picture that Bayless reminded me of this, other services through academic affairs, such as our our tutoring services, career service, academic advising, and academic coaching. Same lessons there. There will be services that will be in person, but there will also be opportunities for remote services.
Awesome, thank you. So we've been talking a lot about what's to come in the future, but I just want to bring it back real quick to last spring. There was hope for graduates to be able to have an in-person ceremony in the winter, but that never happened. With max vaccine rollout, other institutions such as Bridgewater State have found ways to have in-person commencements this spring to honor the classes of both 2020 and 2021 in person, while being approved by the state for the event. What talks were there of Fitchburg State being able to host an in-person ceremony before deciding to move graduation into a virtual format?
Yeah, I think the commencement committee did quite a bit of outreach with student groups. I think they were involved with student government. I think there's a student commencement committee. So I think that there was a fair amount of back and forth. I will note that the one school that you cite is the only school that is doing that. So we want to put that into perspective just a little bit. The concern that we also had was that a lot of schools that are doing these in-person commencements, the fine print is that you're going to be in a giant stadium spread out across whatever. You can't have your parents, you can't have your friend, so that led us to the Falcon Walk idea, which was very popular and well received. Again, I know that it's not exactly what people were dreaming of when they say commencement, but it was sort of a compromised position. Again, I think that we, at least from the administrative side, get caught up between individual wants and the collective good, and that's the challenge. And it's the same battle we fought with testing. It's the same battle that I'm sure will come with vaccinations. It's just impossible to meet everyone's needs satisfactorily. I'm hoping that when things loosen up to a point, we will be able, through the Alumni Association, to bring classes back and celebrate perhaps in a different way where you can do it with your friends, perhaps with your family, in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, if I could, I just add a second. I mean, I think the point that the president made is critical, right? We weighed those options, right? So that you could have it in a big facility. So just as an example, on a personal level, my daughter's graduating at Fenway Park next Saturday. Really cool to say you graduated from Fenway Park, but only one person can come in. The rest of us can stand outside of over the Green Monster and try to see it in here. But you know, and compare that to the graduate Falcon Walk we just had, where I saw family members spend 10, 15 minutes taking pictures throughout the whole time. I think that that was the trade-off that we had into consideration, that we knew whatever we did in person, as Dr. Lapidus said, was not going to be the traditional graduation that we all think of.
All right, thank you. And I did just want to follow up. I believe you mentioned a bit about bringing classes back, because I know I've seen comments I've heard from members, particularly from the class of 2020 in particular, thinking beyond, you know, the Falcon Walk that this year's seniors were able to get. I know a lot of that class in particular are hoping for some kind of return. So there has been talks. I thought I heard you say.
Yes, there has been talk of trying to find a way, perhaps during homecoming or sometime in the fall, again, depending upon what we have the capabilities of doing, to invite people back to do something analogous to what we just did with the 2021 group.
All right, thank you. Moving along, we wanted to bring up an issue that was reported over the course of this semester by those who had to quarantine on campus. This semester, we did receive a couple of reports, and there was a news report put out with several students reporting unsanitary, inhospitable conditions when having to quarantine in the residence halls that were set aside by housing as a part of the self-quarantine process this semester. I just want to know when the administration was made aware that this was a problem.
Well, I can tell you that some of the issues were reported and addressed, and others came as a surprise to us when we saw some of the newscasting. So it was kind of a mixed bag. Admittedly, there were some issues when we had the first group of students in large order come in that I think got caught a little bit between the transition of one semester and another. So some of the stuff that was stockpiled in the rooms, perhaps when in the conversations of expiration dates, was in fact the case, but I believe that those were immediately addressed. There were some other issues that were reported for which we found limited evidence or no evidence of what was reported, and then some came as a complete surprise to us.
All right, thank you. Let's see. So how can the university be sure that this won't happen again? Because as you said, the university was caught by surprise after it was reported the first time. How can we be certain that we won't be caught by surprise again?
Sure. So there are now better quality control measures in place, both on the housing side in reviewing the rooms before there are move-ins. There are new quality control measures in place through Chartwells for food distribution. So again, learning process. We were never set up to operate as a field hospital, nor were we ever set up for in-house food delivery. You know, so again, much like the earlier question you asked, what did we learn? well, we learned a lot of things, but what you're reporting is the result of a first time effort. And I'm not making excuses for it. There were certainly some things that were out of compliance that we've addressed, and all I can do is try to assure you that it won't happen again. And that's where we are.
If I can just add that,
Sure.
as soon as the concerns were raised, they were addressed. And so I do agree that the new protocols that are in place with the COVID operations team is that should help us not be in a situation where there were some of those circumstances. And should something be awry in the future, I feel very confident that whenever Fitchburg State learns about something that's not going the way that we want it to, and I know it was the case in these circumstances, we respond quickly and we provide good service at that moment.
So what can students do if they want to report an issue? Like what would be the quickest, easiest way for them to be able to do that should they encounter another situation like this?
Or
Yeah, the main contact for the quarantine and isolation folks are the same people that have been part of the contact tracing piece. And so those are the main contacts where I would raise the issue. In addition, there are the students that are in quarantine and in isolation get at least one, and typically more than one, phone call a day where we check on the students to see how they're doing. And that is another good place to raise any concerns. If there's something that's more imminent, life, health, safety kinds of things, University Police is also a good location to call and request assistance. And even if it's not an emergency, but if folks are not able to raise the other folks who are supporting, University Police is always kind of a good call. I will also offer up my office, the Vice President for Student Affairs and the Dean of Students office, as a location to raise concerns and questions. And whether or not we're the ones who can solve it, we can always get folks connected with the people to have it be addressed. And many times we can solve it ourselves.
All right, thank you.
So I recently in the beginning of the semester did an article about the 35% buyout option that you can do mid-semester. So normally, not during a regular semester, a student has the ability to leave housing midway through and they have to pay a 35% charge. Now, this semester, I was getting people who were frustrated at the situation because they thought that due to COVID, it was difficult they wanted to get out of their housing situation because maybe COVID was getting worse. They were feeling unsafe. But that 35% buyout option was still there and they couldn't leave housing unless they paid that 35% buyout option. Now, was there ever any talk to maybe get rid of that if students felt uncomfortable staying in that situation, or is that always the school policy?
Do you want me to take the lead on that one, Rich?
Sure.
Okay. So the contracts for housing are a year, and the 35% is the opportunity for students to break the contract early and be able to leave. Now, so your question is it legit for it to have still been in place in COVID? What I can tell you is that there were many exceptions of students who were allowed to leave the contract without being in place for the 35%. It may have been that it looked like on the schedule that there were hybrid classes that required an in-person component to it, but that changed at some point through no fault of the student, So those students who ultimately transitioned to a fully online class, they were able to leave without any kind of financial penalty. And there were many individualized exceptions where folks were able to leave without a financial penalty. And then there were other times when we held to that penalty because the circumstances didn't appear to be quite as compelling, maybe as all of my classes have changed, and so I want to do them from Connecticut. But we spent a lot of time individually with students looking at circumstances.
I also just have a question about students who want to not the school and what the school's power is in terms of COVID. Because if COVID got really bad midway through the semester, you might have to ask students to leave because COVID's so bad. Would students get a refund from the money they paid for that whole year?
They did.
Oh, yes.
They did. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if that happened again this semester, it would be the same situation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
I can't,
Thank you.
I can't charge you for a service I didn't deliver
Right.
through no fault of your own.
Right.
So there were adjustments that happened in the spring of 2020
Mhm.
and adjustments that happened in the fall of 2020.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
All right, we want to think a bit more about, well, actually, as we're about halfway through, I do want to thank you all again for being here today and being willing to answer some of the questions that we have been collecting from the student body as we look to get people answers and of course, an excellent panel here in front of us to help deliver some answers to students who are looking for them. So thank you again for your commitment to being here today. We did want to talk now about wellness days and what the university and how the university felt that wellness days were received by students and faculty this semester, as opposed to the typical spring break format that the university has applied in years prior.
I enjoyed them. Alberto, the wellness days were really in part designed to help with the calendaring of the semester and to try to prevent. So again, remember, we have to kind of remember where we were in the COVID spike when we were putting some of these policies into place. So we had restrictions on out-of-state travel. We had concerns about students perhaps leaving for extended periods of time and then interacting with individuals that might or might not be contagious, bringing it back to campus, how the tracing would work, COVID spikes, et cetera. So part of what the wellness days were designed to do was to sort of break up longer contiguous periods of time, yet also to acknowledge that people were experiencing Zoom or Google fatigue, more stress in their lives than they had experienced before under normal conditions. So that was really the genesis of it. And again, we found that many schools put into place wellness days, or in some cases, I recall a story of a Worcester-based school that had spring break but prevented their residential students from leaving campus, which is not much of a spring break. So I don't know from student affairs or academic affairs what you might have heard of student response to the wellness days that maybe you could add to that.
So yeah, I mean, to the extent is that our original idea was to be able to start the semester 1 week short and 1 week later, and then also try to end it more or less the same. That meant that we needed to give up some days There was a concern about spring break, as Dr. Lapita said. And actually the additional wellness days were an addition that was championed by the students that were on our all university committee, who really thought that the original number of 2 or 3 were not enough. And we added in great part because of the advocacy of the students. I do think that overall, without a doubt, while they were probably appreciated or better stated, understood, I'm not quite sure that it has the same impact as the spring break. You know, without a doubt, you look at our academic calendar, the spring semester is always longer. It's much more of a marathon, and without that break in the middle, I do think that the semester even felt longer. But I do think that, again, the trade-off was a very positive one. If you compare it to cases where you did see increases and spikes after spring break returners. So overall, I think the spirit of them had some impact. Was it to the same level or perceived to have the same restorative effect as spring break does? Probably not. But nonetheless, I think that under the circumstances, they were a very good tool for what we needed to face.
And has there been any consideration into adding days into the fall, perhaps? Was it felt that this was useful and that it could be applied to future semesters?
I can't remember the exact proposal where we're starting it, but there is a discussion of adding a reading day towards the end of the semester. The problem with the fall semester is that if the spring semester is a marathon, the fall semester is a roller coaster, right? It's fast, and we don't have a lot of days of leeway to provide. Plus, in there we always have Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day. We have Thanksgiving. So we have various breaks in there that already add to the numbers that we already have a break. So I don't think that we will be looking to add more in the fall. And again, unless things change, the calendar as it stands right now is to have a spring break the following spring.
Thank you.
Great. And to go along with this kind of situation, if whether or not we're going to continue doing things, will students have the option to choose between satisfactory and unsatisfactory grades when we return in the fall, or no?
Actually, we should probably add this to things that we learned about during the pandemic, or students learned about. Students always had the option of having a satisfactory and unsatisfactory. That's not an invention due to the current pandemic. It was always there. What we did permanently is that we moved it to now students have to choose, or excuse me, before students had to choose to pick satisfactory, unsatisfactory at the drop add date, which is 10 days into the semester. So it doesn't give you a lot of understanding of, but now we've allowed it to be all the way to the date of withdrawal. So you can either decide to withdraw from a course or go or choose a satisfactory and unsatisfactory. There is a forum online that you requested, and I believe that this semester we have about 100 students who opted for that this semester. So that's always been an option. All we did was now we pushed it back to allow students more time to make the decision.
I think it's probably worthwhile, Alberto, to maybe talk just for a second about the implications of choosing satisfactory, unsatisfactory, moving into the future. So it looks great at the front end, but maybe does some damage to the back end.
Right. Well, yes. So there are limitations to that. There are in the catalog. You can find them in the catalog. You know, there are courses that you can't have a satisfactory and unsatisfactory depending on your major. What we call the foundational courses in your general education, you can't have a satisfactory and unsatisfactory, and you can only have 12 credits. So essentially 4 classes throughout your whole time that are satisfactory and unsatisfactory. In addition to that, if students are considering graduate school For example, there are certain courses that you want to have a grade in. So the lesson is always to speak to your advisor about what the best option is for you.
All right, thank you. Moving along now, this semester saw the return of evaluations as students have been getting emails asking to look at their classes. We did want to learn what went into the decision to put a halt on evaluations for the spring 2020 and the fall 2020 semesters.
So what will be the evaluations?
Just what halted the rollout of evaluations last spring and this fall for courses?
So the evaluations were halted as a result of a conversation with the faculty and the organization that represent the faculty. It was perceived that given the quick turnaround and the change of modalities, and especially in the spring, that faculty really didn't feel as, the student experience that they had gotten in their class was what they had planned for. And therefore, really, the instrument that we use to measure that really was not going to be reflective of the experience that students had. That was extended one more semester into the fall, because again, faculty were once again teaching potentially courses online or remote, or that they've never done that for. The spring, on the other hand, it was a repetition for at least of the second half of the spring semester. And then faculty, it was seen that faculty should have had some more experience and ability to address that, and why we thought it was important to give student voices again in the evaluation process. So our plan is to continue with the evaluations moving forward in one way or another. The instrument may change, but overall, the student evaluation process will continue.
All right, thank you. We wanted to take a look now as we look to re-enter some semblance of what we were facing before, a regular life on campus and all that entails. There were some things that were put on hold that perhaps students are now looking at again and wondering what will happen. I am referring to the pool and the space there that is in the recreation center now. So as the campus looks to get up and running again, what is the current status of the pool at this point in time?
Yeah, so the pool is permanently closed. And the next step, and we started this, you're exactly right. So I think we started right before the pandemic hit. We had shared with some student groups, particularly student government, but I think there were others as well, some very preliminary architectural drawings for how that space would be recaptured and brought into the fold of the rec center. The data that we had shown was that predominantly the weight room and some of the physical exercise areas were not large enough, and so we were going to try to do some reshifting of space to accommodate the large space that the pool has, and also looking into the architecture of that building. There was also the possibility of 2 floors rather than 1, because the ceiling in the pool area was a 2-story. It was just dead space. So it was an opportunity to rethink potentially that whole area. Additionally, the survey had suggested other interest in wellness areas, yoga, mindfulness, some things. So there was the beginnings of a conversation with the student body and the architect to rethink that space. We'll get that back in the queue as soon as we get back to some normalcy here. We shifted gears and spent most of the last year thinking about technology and distribution of technology and new infrastructure that was going to support what we've been living now for the last year to 18 months. But we'll get back and start having that conversation again once we're able to do that in a meaningful way.
So are there currently, on that same line, are there currently any campus projects coming up that are maybe big construction projects or anything going on in that sense?
Well, probably the biggest construction project on campus that you've seen that's not particularly sexy is the big electrical infrastructure project. So as you've watched these guys trench around the campus and through the campus, that is essentially a rebuilding and a reconnecting of all of the electrical power on the campus. So, sort of envision the campus as a big wagon wheel with the outside of the campus being the edge of the wheel, and all the buildings moving towards the center of campus as the spokes. And so that's about a $24-25 million project to bring more reliable electricity into all the buildings and to add some redundancy through generators, et cetera, in case there were power failures. So, and we were fortunate enough that that is fully funded through the state. So no student tuition dollars, no university dollars are going towards that project. The state as a whole is deep into deferred maintenance across all the campuses. It's in the multiple billions of dollars. And so they have decided, and again, we take much of the direction from the building authority that owns the buildings that compose this campus as to how they want to allocate resources. So I think moving forward, realistically, you're not going to see very much new construction. What you're going to see is deferred maintenance work, is bringing up to speed buildings that need to be modernized, et cetera. So if you've taken a walk through Percival, you've seen the work that's been done there. If you're an education major and you've looked at the work done in McKay, those are examples of what you're much more likely to see rather than building a new building outright. So stay tuned. A lot of it comes from applications we put into the state. A lot of it's matching money. It's cobbling together a lot of different resources to get to what we need to get to. The construction market is red hot right now. Everything costs probably way more than it should. So it's going to be a slow process, but we do make a commitment to infrastructure improvement every year to the tune of about $5 or $6 million. And we'll continue to move on that front, plus whatever we can garner from the state to help us.
Thank you. Thinking along the lines of almost infrastructure, as you put it, there have been concerns raised by some students on campus about accessibility to recycling and concerns over the university's sustainability efforts in having so few recycling outlets on campus. How does the university feel that it is handling the sustainability effort? Is there, I should say, any sort of conversation about how that looks on campus?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think you're right, and I have heard some issues about the recycling issue, which we will ramp up. I think part of it was energized around the food service delivery this year. We probably moved far more, to-go boxes and bags, et cetera, than perhaps this campus has ever delivered. And I think that really put a spotlight on it. Interestingly enough, I will tell you that the campus as a whole has a really very, very successful sustainability program. And in fact, in December of 2020, we were identified as one of the top performers in the state and won a significant award for sustainability efforts. But again, perhaps not things that you see or not things that you would find particularly sexy. So for example, the elimination of oil and oil generated machinery was eliminated. Buildings that are being renovated through deferred maintenance are resulting in those buildings being LEED certified for efficiency. Unless you take an aerial shot of the campus, you can't see the solar panels on the roofs of buildings. So there's a lot of things, and perhaps that you raise a good point that we need to do a better job of sharing that with the campus. About 40 or 50% of our food waste is rediverted to farms for animals. So there's a lot of things going on, and we need to share that. I've talked to the MassPIRG for folks about that as well. But if you're just asking about the more visible recycling cans, et cetera, that's on the radar, and you'll start to see more of those roll out.
Is that something that potentially, trying to put a timeline on it, this fall students can expect to see perhaps a bit more around campus?
I'm not gonna. I don't want to give you a date that I don't know of. We've had the conversation. We've heard it. You will see some action on it. I don't want to pin myself down to X number of cans or X number of locations, but you will visibly see some changes.
All right, thank you. And as we are moving closer to the end here, we just have another question or so. Recently, it was announced that Becker College in Worcester is closing down, and
Right.
that there will be some students coming to Fitchburg State. What went into that decision to take in those students from Becker College?
Yeah. So first of all, we felt that one, we were concerned about students being displaced, and secondly, we have a tremendous number of programs here that match up to the Becker curriculum. The provost and the faculty spent a lot of time developing articulation agreements between our campus and theirs to show students how they could move seamlessly from one place to another. We didn't want students to have to take steps backward or sideways to continue to move forward in a timely fashion with their degrees. That was the predominant motivation. We worked with the Department of Higher Ed to assist them, as did other institutions. But as I said, we're close, and we match up pretty well to many of the attributes of their students and ours. Similar curriculum. I don't know, Alberto, is there anything that we could add to that? I mean, we've seen considerable number of students approach admissions, and we continue to still help them to work their way into the student body here.
Yeah, no, I think you captured it well. I mean, we were approached by the Department of Higher Education, some folks who we know in Becker, looking for opportunities for their students. Clearly our close proximity to Worcester made it attractive. Plus, a lot of the programs, almost all of their programs that they have, with the exception of a few, really we had similar programs here. So we created pathways for those students to be able to jump in depending on where they were.
All right, thank you. Okay, and so I think that with that being said, President Lapidus, Provost Cordeia, Vice President Laura Bayless, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'd like to thank everyone who joined us virtually and submitted questions as well for us to ask. I want to reiterate that the staff of The Point is going to look to continue to gather and report on essential information and document, the voice and stories of our community at this time. So this concludes today's town hall. We wish everybody luck as we move towards the end of this semester. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.